All right, so I wanted to address a couple things. Lately, there's been a big push on two big issues that I've been noticing in social media and mainstream media as well. Number one, which I'm not going to tackle today, although it could have its own discussion about. Although I think James Lindsay is doing a great job in addressing it. Are the woke social justice types pointing out, or not pointing out, falsely stating that people that are criticizing critical race theory aren't actually identifying it, or rather don't even know what it is, which of course is an incorrect assumption. Now, to be fair, there's a lot of people in, I guess, the social media, sphere that really don't know what critical theory is, critical race theory especially, in that they just call it Marxism or social Marxism or cultural Marxism. And that's a really low resolution criticism. It's not even a legitimate criticism. I think I would actually align with the critical race theorists, the social justice type, saying that that's not a legitimate, I guess, a way in which you would address that particular ideology. And so, if you want to say there's some truth to the defense, sure. But the reality is that there are legitimate and accurate criticisms of critical race theory and critical theory in general that are out there, being put forth by folks like Helen Pluckrose, James Lindsay, Neil Shenvi, on the Christian side, I guess, if you want, on the religious aspect of it, and many others. There's a full understanding of not just what critical race theory and critical theory in general are today, but in fact the entire history and development of these ideas, these ideologies, call them social frameworks, cultural frameworks, in assessing things, and so there's a lot of work being done in that sphere. So I don't know that I really want to spend a whole lot of time on that, because there's a lot of the people doing work on it that I far more intelligent and versed in it than I am, and the words are being brought out, right? These concepts, and this is the thing when it comes to woke social justice. Is the language is all still new. Number one, they're redefining a lot of the language, so that language is new in how it needs to be addressed. But then there's also the language of those that are in response to it, right? So like we all know the arguments or the criticisms of past social constructs that are untenable, right? So actual Marxism, socialism, Nazism, actual racism, these kinds of things, we all have a handle on the language to use. We don't have a handle on the language to use with regards to critical race theory all the time, at least not when criticizing it. And to be honest, the advocates don't have a handle on the language to use in promoting it either. But I will say this, is that there are other areas in which we also lack the language to address issues that are brought up, and that's the second issue I want to bring up today that I want to talk about, and that would be the issue of cancel culture. Lately it's been suggested or pointed out that cancel culture is the same thing as the traditional practice of boycott, like an actual boycott. And I'm going to push back on that. I'm going to push back on that for, I think some very clear, distinct differences that there are between, boycotting and your cancel culture thing that's happening today. So let's address, there's three specific differences. And I would say the first one maybe might be a little tenuous in that it's not a hard and fast difference. I think it's a typical difference. We see it that way more often than not, but it's not always the case. But the other two, I think, are particularly distinct. So the first one is the targets, right? So who is the target of boycotts and who's the target of cancel culture, okay? And not political affiliation, right? But in type, right? Completely separate. And then the second would be methods, okay? So the methods that are used in order to achieve what ends. And then the third would be the ends or the goals. Those are the three differences. So targets. When we're dealing with boycotts, the target has traditionally been those that are larger, more powerful, so corporations, typically large organizations, occasionally but very rarely individuals. So it is, and again, this is why the first one's a tenuous one. The cancel culture has predominantly dealt with individuals, with people who are of a, how do I want to say it, maybe a more privatized type of atmosphere. They're coming from that type of background. Whereas boycotts have traditionally been against the corporation. They've traditionally been against the machine. The larger, more powerful than any individual can hope to succeed against type of corporation or type of organization. That's what boycotts have been against. Cancel culture, of course, as I said, is typically against the individual. All right. Methods. Boycotts have always used the methods of the free market, so the free market pressures, typically democratic methods. And what I mean by that is this. The goal in a boycott is to get people to vote with their dollar, right? It's to get people to vote with currency, to say, hey, I disagree with the practice or the behavior or the position of this company. And because I disagree with it, I'm going to stop spending money. And I'm also going to take some time and effort to say, hey, all of you other people out there should also stop spending money at this company because of this practice or behavior or position, whatever it may be. And so it's democratic in that what boycotts typically have done is they have dealt with the individual and the organization of individuals to pull back, right, to harm the company by pulling back their purchasing power, okay, in a way that doesn't prevent those who disagree with them from continuing to purchase the product, services, or what have you, okay. Cancel culture is distinctly different in that they do not seek to utilize a democratic process. They don't seek to utilize the free market pressures that exist or tools that exist. Instead, what they do is they seek to utilize really insidious and immoral and unethical means. So they don't attack, and I don't mind saying a boycott is an attack. It is. It's a financial attack on a corporation or what have you. But with cancel culture, the goal is not to attack the specific target. The goal is to attack the underlying foundation that supports the target. So whether that's a network, right, that airs an artist or a journalist or whatever it may be, whether that's companies that another company might rely upon, right? So your target might be Nike, for example. I don't know that any cancel culture has ever tried to target Nike because they're historically, they're insanely left-leaning. But let's just say they wanted to target Nike. So what, in the cancel culture mindset, you wouldn't directly boycott Nike. Instead, what you would do is you would go and you would find all of the producers and distributors of the materials that Nike uses, and they're the ones that you would target. So cancel culture, what it does is it applies very specific and targeted pressure on the foundation that their ultimate target relies upon. So what they do is they would say, hey, listen, if you guys are going to continue to support them, we're going to blast you in social media, in mainstream media, in every other avenue that we can to make you seem absolutely evil. And so this is what you must do. You must cave to our demands, and you must refuse to do business with our ultimate target, who is, in this case, Nike, in that example. But that's how cancel culture works. They utilize very unethical and immoral means to do that. Okay, it's just not right. And the third issue is the goals. Okay, or the ends. Traditional boycotts. What do? Traditional boycotts essentially seek to change behavior. Okay, now whether that's maybe specific behavior of an employee, or whether that is maybe let's just say a practice. You have a company that is engaged in, I don't know, some sort of marketing, or maybe they're testing on animals, testing chemicals on animals. I have no idea what it might be. But so in a traditional boycott, the goal is to change the behavior. So once the company has submitted and they have repented or recanted, or they have altered and they've said, you know what, we understand the concern now. It's been made very clear to us. We are no longer going to engage in X behavior. Or maybe a CEO or a person who's representing the company says, hey, this has been said that I should walk back this statement that I said. Maybe there was something that was said. And they repent. They say, I was wrong. I apologize. I'm going to do better in the future. A boycott ends. A boycott ends. And it ends because it achieved their goal. And their goal was to seek change. Their goal was to improve the world, okay? To make this a better place for all of us. And that's what the goal was. Now, there could be disagreement on whether or not there's that whatever change a particular boycott was intent, was good or held by many people or not. I don't know. But that's to be decided democratically. Cancel culture does not do that. Cancel culture has no intention of ever receding. It has no desire to submit or to stop the pressure or to allow for a future in which a person that they have targeted to ever do business again. Period. End of story. So as a result, we see people who have engaged in a behavior or have engaged in some kind of comment. They maybe said something in the past years ago, sometimes decades ago. And what happens? Even after an apology, even after walking it back, even after engaging in specific acts to counter their initial behavior, whatever it may be, cancel culture continues to aggress a person, right? To try to destroy a person that is their target, okay? And that's distinct. That is wholly distinct from boycotts. So, just to say, there is no comparison to cancel culture and boycotting. They're not the same thing, right? They have very little in common in the big scheme of things, okay? There may be people that have called something a boycott, and in reality they were engaged in cancel culture. There may have been people who have engaged in cancel culture, but engaged in a boycott, but engaged in cancel culture, but called it a boycott, whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, these two concepts are very different. So this is something that's happening in woke ideology, the woke social justice movement. That's problematic, and I don't mean problematic in the critical theory term, but it's actually a problem for all of us because what it is doing is rewriting the social norms, the cultural norms that we've held by. There is a place in our culture for boycotts, right? Companies can do wrong. They can make bad choices, and they can do things that harm others, and we should have a means or a way to hold them accountable to that. And there should be a libertarian means to hold them accountable to it. In other words, the government should not be the source of all solutions, especially because the government is so essentially infiltrated by corporations and lobbyists from these large corporations. So the common man needs an escape valve. We need a social pressure, a source of free market pressure to apply to corporations to cause them to change their behavior. And boycotts serve that purpose. Cancel culture does not. Cancel culture serves to undercut the democratic means. It serves to undercut the free market economy. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it serves to undercut the individual. So it doesn't fit the American free market economy. It doesn't fit the ideals that we have here in our Constitution. And it certainly does not fit a biblical worldview. Just coming from as a Christian man who is looking at these things from that angle. But having said that, those are two of the big issues in discussion today in our culture. I just wanted to take a moment to point out some of those distinctions. I'm more than happy to continue that conversation. Please leave any comments you want. I'm posting this on my Facebook. I don't typically check the comments on YouTube, but I'll try to. But go ahead and leave any comments you want, and I would be encouraged and happy to carry on this conversation with you. Have a great day.